Hello, it be me again. Yeah, it's a little cool today. Anyway, that's, nice and all that crap. But, anyway. Yes, the last two videos I did pretty good. The do in the morning one, it's a lot of video. And the dot spook one, 20 minutes and 30 minutes. But, I mean, we're sort of seeing what's happening here. Is people just throw this line out. It's a religion to recognize value. And, I mean, realistically, there is no conversation with that kind of mentality. If everybody's allowed to just make up value, then again, how do you pass judgment on anyone who abuses? It's just idiotic. You can't say it and then impose it. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. You can't say it's opinion and then pass law telling people they can't do something. But in a way you can just say, well, if enough of us are right, then might makes right. But that's not terribly logical. So if you can't do better than whoever wins, and you're not going to say that whoever wins is right, then that's just Darwinian silly putty. That's just like saying that, go into a boxing ring, one guy walks up to the other guy, kicks him in the nuts, the end of the fight, he wins. I mean, it's just bullshit. It has nothing to do with merit or ability or any rational, in my opinion, standard. So, I mean, if you can't acknowledge that suffering sucks, there's no conversation. I'll see you at the battlefield, because that's a non-starter for me. So anyway, I was thinking also, though, making those videos, a couple of thoughts popped in my head. At one point I said something like, it would be unreasonable to think your child would be immortal. And so that's sort of not true anymore. Because, it could be that tomorrow they come up with a pill that, you take one a day, and it basically keeps your cells from aging. We break the mechanical process within the cell that permits the aging process. So your body just continually thinks it's 20 years old. It just doesn't allow the automatic degrades that it currently allows, just because death was a necessary feature of life. You couldn't have reproduction on planet Earth if the biological organisms did not acquire mortality. Mortality is a necessary component of practical survival in a closed environment, as you can't eat your own shit, theoretically. Only your descendants will be able to do that, and if you don't evolve quickly enough, you will suffocate yourselves before, inevitably, you will suffocate in your own excrement, your own waste. And so, obviously, the surviving life forms had to acquire mortality, and that's why we have it. So anyway, let's just say we did overcome mortality. We'd also overcome, let's say, 90%. I mean, mortality in the genetic sense, the cellular level. We would abolish 90% of fatal disease in all likelihood. So the only way you would die is through, as a practical matter, would be through some genetic defect, or beyond just aging and the vulnerabilities that you're exposed to through aging, like cancer, or accident. Well, in such a world, obviously, we would have to have constraints on reproduction. Replacement population would have to be a non-starter in a sense. So we could have a law, say, that says you couldn't have immortality pills if you intended on reproducing. And I'm sure under that circumstance, all of a sudden, birth control would be perfectly reliable. I'm pretty certain that people would exercise responsibility. So all of a sudden we can't stop the DNA from making us reproduce. All of a sudden I think that would go right out the fucking window, and people would find it all of a sudden so easy and convenient not to have children. Because they'd have a self-interest, and that would be all it's about. So eat that, put that in your pipe and smoke it, to be serious. All you need is a self-interest. Give the human animal a self-interest, and they can do anything. And that's the fact of the matter. So it's not about can, it's about will. If we have the will, we can do things. If we don't have the will, we won't do things. That's simple. So anyway, that does illustrate, I think, the point that people would willingly sacrifice child rearing and smookum nookums and all this other bullshit. They'd find some other way to satisfy their little huggy needs if their mortality was the price they were going to pay for it. You know, if being exposed, if they could buy their way out of these unpleasant realities of the current existence of disease and death, they would certainly pay any price to avoid those things. So that sort of gets me back to my currency argument. And if we established a currency for how we bought, and not to use a silly person's phrase, but let's a la carte. Okay, let's a la carte our life experiences. So you're no longer buying it as a cable package deal, okay, where you're getting all the channels or none of the channels. No, instead, you can buy each individual channel and pay a price for each individual experience. And the price you're going to pay is a currency you receive for the pain you're willing to endure. So let's establish that in my life, $1 million. Let's just use that as a number. And that's the number we'll establish. So all the miseries I've experienced are $1 million worth, and all the pleasures I've experienced are $1 million worth, let's say. And now I'm facing the counter, a new start, and I have this $1 million. And so we've established a gradient. I've scaled all the positive experience, and I've said this is the number 1 experience, this is number 2 experience. And so we proportionally allocate some value. I mean, I say this, you know, we put numbers on them that allow it to be proportional. So you could have something valued at 100 and nothing else until you get to 60. So you would pay twice as much for one experience than you would another. But however we value it, I'm just saying, let's just imagine pie charts and, you know, all that kind of crap. Now, what I'm arguing is that if we take any human being and do that with their life experience, okay, monetize the individual experiences, that they'll run out of money buying their way out of miseries. That they'll use up 90% of their money on the counter, okay, when they're shopping for their life. So now you have $1 million, and on the shelf you can either buy not having something, you can buy having something. All right, those are the two things you can buy. Obviously, most people will pay money not to have the bad things and pay money to have the good things. Now, my argument to you is that when you see the things with the price tags on them, you're going to pay to prevent those big baddies. You're going to pay for them right at first thing you're going to do is pay to get rid of those bad ones. And so you're going to start running out of money real fast. And and if you run out of money, you're stuck with whatever's left on the shelf. Okay? So that's the liability here. You run out of money, you can't have the good things that are on the shelf, and you have to have the bad things that are left on the shelf. So if you don't buy the bad ones out of non-existence into non-existence, you'll be stuck with those. So that's the catch here. So, and I'm just arguing that you're going to spend all your money, 90% of it, getting rid of that bad crap. And you're going to have very little left to try to buy that good stuff. Very little left. You know. And so I think that's where this is. And that's just assuming you've had a life of some sort of balance. You know, if you've had a really horrific life, we know that we could change that equation so easily and just say you would pay $1 million just to avoid the one event. So if we really applied a fair value, which would be what would the average person pay to avoid elephant man disease, I think the average person would pay a huge amount of their life currency to avoid having to live that life. So, you know, that would be the fairest way to conduct this, is to have the pricing relate to what the average person would be willing to pay for a particular experience, or be willing to pay in a competitive environment to avoid an experience. I'm going to outbid a lot of people not to have Elephant Man disease. I'm not going to get stuck with that bastard. Alright, so yeah, I'm going to bid damn high. I'm going to bid maybe everything I got to ensure that I don't get stuck with it, that some other asshole lives it. But, you know, theoretically, I do know it doesn't matter who endures it, and that's the catch of this whole fucking thing that people really aren't getting, is that I have a right to fight for the future, because by my philosophy, the future is essentially me. I'm going to be there. A consciousness is going to be there. It's not substantially different than me. It's not substantially different in how it acquired its understanding. Not substantially different in how it feels and how it senses the world and how it sees the world. And so if I don't look out for it, if I don't buy it immunity to the recklessness of these slobs, I'm letting myself down. But ironically, here again we have the mechanism of self-interest, because from my perspective, I have essentially created a self-interest in preventing the future. It is in my own interest because I have made it part of what I'm connected to. I've acknowledged the future almost as a twin brother or something. It is me. It is, in substance, me. And if I don't do something to protect it, I'm going to feel it when that sword runs it through, when it gets brutalized by the stupid world I've allowed to exist, by the battle I didn't fight. If I don't earn its freedom now, it will be a slave, and it will be tormented and abused. Yeah, and that's just the truth of it. And so I am, in a sense, functioning as if the person with the immortality pill, where I'm just simply saying, I will dispose of my welfare. I will dispose and reject and rebuke whatever gain I can make here, whatever goodies I could possibly purchase to essentially buy immunity from suffering in the future. I see more in the future store than I see in the current store. There's more bad stuff to buy in that store, to buy immunity to, immunity from. So even though I have some money left over in terms of currency, I'm going to spend whatever I have in that future store buying immunity for a future self. Now, that really shouldn't be too much for people to understand. I mean, if they can understand time travel in silly Star Wars or Star Trek movies, they should be able to understand this one. You know, it's not that complicated. I'm not saying you will be reincarnated. I'm not saying I'm going to be reincarnated. I'm saying that the practical fact is a pawn is a pawn is a pawn is a pawn. And it's just silly for my brain, my intellect, to make any distinction. Just as Spock would say, the needs of the many outweigh the wants or needs of the few, or the one. Because they are equals. The many, the future, the whatever, they are you in value. They're indistinguishable from you in terms of their substance, in terms of everything that really matters. They are you. What doesn't matter is a name, or a shirt, or a hairstyle, or a color of my eyes. That shit doesn't matter. What matters is the conscious capacity, the awareness, the sensitivity, the vulnerability. That is what matters. That is your substance. That is your weight. That is your meaning. That is your gravity. Yeah, really. So obviously these people who are blowing up value, I don't even know how they could, they obviously can't extend value into this world yet. They haven't even matured enough to do that, let alone be able to extend value into the future and understand the tremendous value gain in preventing the pain, in preventing the harm that will be imposed if we do not read a better script, if we do not allow logic to function in our brains and acknowledge the simple truth that it is a game that's being played for no reason and that it comes at a preposterously high price. Anyway, and therefore we should stop buying. Very simple. Stop committing to the contract. Stop signing the contract, especially signing it for participants who won't be consenting. You can't imply their consent until you've declared yourself an authority to do that. You have to essentially get a power of attorney, and none of you have that. You don't have a right to trespass on their welfare unless you're doing it like the state. The Constitution says the state can interfere if it has good cause. You have to have good cause, and self-interest isn't good cause. So enough said. Thank you very much.